Hello and welcome to the video. Today's topic is TurboFolk music, and it is in its relation to world music. Now, world music is almost any type of music that's not Western, and TurboFolk music is definitely not Western by most standards. And just to get right into it, we'll talk about the what led to the creation of TurboFolk music. Okay, so TurboFolk music was created out of the rural countryside of Yugoslavia and then became popularized within the cities of Yugoslavia by the 1980s. And it became very prominent when the collapse of Yugoslavia occurred in the 1990s. And this further led to, turbo folk music gaining popularity as a result of what happened with Yugoslavia specifically. And what happened with Yugoslavia specifically is a bunch of regions, the entire nation state collapsed overnight with the leader. Let me find his name really quick. Um, let's see, how do you pronounce it? Slobodan Milosevic. Yeah, he took over after Tito, and Tito was like the unifying body. So Slavovic was, Serbian, and he didn't respect the other leaders. So what happened is, practically, these countries which hadn't had independence in almost their entire existence and creation, I would say, overnight had to create a self-identity for these people. And Turbofolk was an outlet for doing that properly. And it's really fascinating how this is a good case study for nation building overnight, practically. Um, Now, most of the music was popularized through the use of RTV, which was the Yugoslav, national television station at the time. And the themes based around turbo folk music wasn't it, turbo folk music was very organic, it was very grassroots, so it took on a lot of different aspects of Western culture to the point of even plagiarism at sometimes, and just created its own self-identity out of all of that. And you can find a lot of aspects of folk, electric, pop, hip-hop, and rock music being found throughout it, because all these different nations collapsed and were I would best describe it as being ultra patriotic nationalists. And with that, they just were trying to build a nation overnight, practically. And you see that a lot with their music. Um, a lot of their music talks and discusses about love, um, love, sex, alcohol use, materialism, but more specifically also just the overall glorification of negative behavior. And as we'll see with the attitudes of most of these songs, at least as of my examples, you'll find that the more widely known cases of turbofolk are depictions of fascism, nationalism, xenophobia, and just that's actually about it practically. And I will warn you, in the footage you'll be seeing and music videos, because they did make music videos. You will be seeing active military and combat war zones, as well as them committing actual war crimes. You'll be seeing footage of music videos produced of concentration camps, and just the destruction of Bosnian villages as well. Now, you're looking at this map, obviously, and you see Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Croatia. And these were the main three that produced turbofolk music. Macedonia and Slovenia were spared during the war, so they were able just to do Western things, I guess is the best way to word that. But these three are the subject of most music produced in turbofolk music, even in the present now. First off, we're going to start off with traditional Serbian TurboFolk music because that's where you're going to be finding just the standardization of it all. And a good example is right here. And I think, at least with this example of Serbian turbofolk music, you're going to be able to at least tell that it's more polka-based and more traditional Eastern Europe dance music, with the trumpet and accordion being the main subject. Obviously, that wasn't the only case, but that is a good example of what straightforward, traditional Serbian turbofolk music is. And, they sing their verses in more of a, like, I don't know how to really describe it, but more elongated. And you'll see that more greater with the Croatians and how they were able to produce music with this idea and identity of, we are not Serbs, we are Catholic, we wish to be our own people. And they project their military might, because what happened in the Wars of Unification, which failed, the Croatians were able to defend against the Serbian invasion, and then the Bosnians didn't want any part of the war, so the Bosnians just tried to hide, and they were not successful in hiding. As you can tell, they're sandwiched in between both nations. So now we're going to look at a Croatian turbofolk, which is also very interesting. And this one actually has a lot more accents towards rock music. And even in the video, you can see it's a bunch of soldiers singing together, practicing their military drills. And it's a lot more, I would say, I don't want to say modern, but I definitely would say you can see a lot more Western influence in Croatian music, and how it uses turbofolk as, they're still trying to project that ultra-nationalist like message of, oh, we are great Croatian soldiers, and we are brothers in arms, we will fight to the death, and to show you the depictions of the soldiers charging into battle and all that. But it has those accents of rock with the timpani, or not timpani. It is, well, you know what I'm trying to say. It just is giving off more of a more Western energy compared to the Serbian equivalent, which is just, average polka. You see more rock influences, what I'm trying to best describe. Now, Bosnian music is interesting. And I will say, Bosnians overall, during the entire conflict, I think got the worst end of the stick in all of this, when they wanted no part of the war. They just wanted to exist and be safe and not worry about the hardships. They just wanted that. I will say this as well. Bosnia, even today, has a very messy situation. Bosnians aren't like most Europeans from the Balkans. They are neither Catholic. They're not Christian. They're mostly Muslims, and a lot of racism and xenophobia could be derived towards and directed at specifically the Bosniak Muslims, because of how different they are, and they treat their heritage as being an equivalent to the Ottoman Turks, which, if you're not familiar, did subjugate the region for well over hundreds of years, as well as, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but specifically the Ottomans people care about because the Bosniaks trace themselves back to Turkish descent. And you can see that not specifically here, as this is more Bosnians trying to be Western in nature with their music in this example, but they also have a lot more diversity in their TurboFolk. And I'll show you the first Western case of Bosniak TurboFolk. And that's a really good example of the militarism of the Bosniaks had, as they were persecuted on all sides for being Muslim in a Christian part of the world. And you can see that very evident as they were using more Western rock examples, and very well done in my opinion, their attempts at mimicking Western rock music with their own, Bosniak flair. But you can also see a lot more, a more Eastern Arabic approach, as with this example, they definitely cared a lot more about their Muslim heritage than might be what I'm letting on. They're just such a unique people. So I'll give you this example of a more Middle Eastern flair of Bosnian TurboFolk music, which I also think is very significant. And I think this really shows. I think it can be very self-evident that you can tell that this has a lot more Middle Eastern flair, with more of a musical choice, an instrumental choice, and how it's presented with those long instrumental sections with repetitive chanting, I guess is the best way of wording that, and more of a Arabic style. And I think that really does show specifically the length that the Bosniak people were able to go in finding their own unique, distinct culture and identity, while being this religious minority in the Balkan region in Europe. And sticking with their identity, I would like to mention, the people found here. I would say during at least the war times, there was a lot more ignorance and hatred towards one another, to the point, as I'll show you here in this case example. This is a Serbian irredentist song, which means that the Serbians would have wanted the Bosnians to be conquered, but it shows the Serbians in another light don't care about the Bosnians, and they even mock the Bosnians as they show depictions of the Serbian the Serbian state at the time, Yugoslavia at the time, rounding up the Bosniak Muslims and putting them into concentration camps and mocking their Islamic faith during the song. And I will say this is a very good moment for viewer discretion is advised. And I would show you right then and there, the people with the black mask. Those were the special forces found in Yugoslavia that were leading the genocide because they didn't want to be identified by the Interpol and other humanitarian aid groups that were trying to bring justice to the genocide going on. And I'll continue.
Što ne može Srbina prodati za brašno. Oj, Alija, Aljo, šta će tebi hrana? Koliko bolan misliš ima Ramazana? Oj, Alija, Alija, izgubit ćeš čast kad ti Tuđman ovce uzme, a pošalje mast. Oj, Alija, Aljo, tebi nešto pali, misliš da si veliki, a tako si mali.
And I'll pause it here just so I can repeat what they're saying. There are no more Turkish pies made from the Povicina's golden wheat, and Povicina is a region in Yugoslavia at the time, which did hold a small Muslim minority. And as you can even tell in the video, that is a real video and footage of the actual Bosniak genocide that did occur during the 1990s. And here they are in this light showing no remorse. They treat it as if it's funny somehow that they are so glorious and victorious, and oh, look at your people, they're being subjugated in these camps and we're killing them. Like, in their eyes, somehow this is hilarious. And it really shows this sense of militarism and barbarism found between the ultranationalistic nations that were trying to be forged from essentially nothing, just because they disagreed on religious lines and basic political lines. And wrapping that up with what TurboFolk stands for, it is evolving, I would say, personally. I find that TurboFolk is now more popular in the West, more specifically the United States, Canada, Germany, and the United Kingdom and France, than actually the Yugoslav nations themselves. And with that, we're finding with these Western audiences discovering TurboFolk, they're latching onto it as a new as a part of a new wave of TurboFolk that's becoming really modernized, with it reaching out now into the 2010s and possibly 2020s, as people in some far-right communities now are using it, but as well, you're finding a lot of LGBT communities using TurboFolk as an identity in itself, and they're making LGBT TurboFolk, and new ideas are coming out of that. You know, it's interesting how people will use TurboFolk now as a way to say that you're anti-fascist, but in the past it was being fascist. It's just so unique, and I would say TurboFolk is vague enough that now most communities are able to find their own personal meaning out of it all and just be unique. It's very interesting how, with a political crisis like Yugoslavia, we were able to create such a fascinating and unique musical genre, which is going to grow, I think, perpetually into the future. And I would say not become a part of the mainstream, but you're definitely going to see a little bit more influence in, I would say, punk culture, ska culture, and even some electronic and folk cultures that still exist in the region today. And with that, I would just like to say thank you for a wonderful semester at, with this class. But more importantly, I would like to say thank you for uh, TurboFolk being given the chance that it needs to be seen in a classroom setting. Hopefully, this helps people understand that, with culture and fluidity, anything is possible with music. This is a fine example of how a hyper militaristic and, I would say, crazy compared to the West cultural standards is now being taken over by the West in some ways, and we're finding it to be romanticized in some ways, and other ways not so much. And with that, I'll keep most opinions out of that, I think. And with that, I would like to say thank you, and let me find my closing. Goodbye.